Imagine a man so committed to truth that he would rather die than stop questioning. A man who walked barefoot through the streets of ancient Athens, engaging anyone who would listen in conversations that would change the course of human thought. A man who claimed to know nothing, yet became the foundation of Western philosophy. Socrates. Long before modern self-help gurus preached the importance of self-awareness, before critical thinking became a core educational objective, there was a stonemason turned philosopher who roamed the agora of Athens with a revolutionary method of inquiry that still bears his name. The unexamined life is not worth living. Athens, 5th century BCE. Democracy was still in its experimental stages. The city-state had reached its golden age, dominating the Mediterranean, erecting magnificent temples, and birthing the greatest minds of the era. In this cradle of Western civilization, most citizens were content with their growing prosperity and power. But one man saw something missing. Socrates, with his bulging eyes, snub nose, and unkempt appearance, was an unlikely revolutionary. Born around 469 BCE to a stonemason and a midwife, he received the basic education afforded to citizens but had no formal philosophical training. He served honorably as a hoplite soldier in the Peloponnesian War, even saving the life of the brilliant General Alcibiades during battle. Yet military honor wasn't his destiny. Something drove Socrates to question the fundamental assumptions of his society. According to Plato, the oracle at Delphi had proclaimed that no one was wiser than Socrates, a declaration that puzzled him deeply as he was acutely aware of his own ignorance. And so began his lifelong mission, to understand what the oracle could possibly have meant. Socrates would approach the most respected citizens of Athens, politicians, poets, craftsmen, and engage them in conversation about concepts they claimed to understand. Justice, courage, piety, love. Through careful questioning, he would expose contradictions in their thinking, revealing that they didn't truly understand these fundamental ideas. His conclusion: perhaps the oracle was right. Socrates was wisest because he alone recognized his own ignorance. This radical intellectual humility became the foundation of his approach. "I know that I know nothing," he reportedly declared, not as an excuse for ignorance, but as the essential first step toward genuine wisdom. Consider how revolutionary this approach was. In a society that valued confident assertions and rhetorical victory, Socrates introduced systematic doubt. In an age when knowledge was considered something to possess and protect, he treated it as a collaborative pursuit. In a culture that revered tradition and authority, he demanded rational justification for every belief. No wonder he made powerful enemies. Ask yourself, when was the last time you said "I don't know" without embarrassment? When did you last change your mind based on better evidence? How often do you question your most cherished beliefs? Socrates' first lesson. True wisdom begins with acknowledging your ignorance. Intellectual humility isn't weakness. It's the foundation of genuine learning. The moment you become certain you understand something completely is the moment you stop growing. I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. If you had encountered Socrates in the Agora, you wouldn't have found him delivering lectures or writing treatises. Instead, you'd have witnessed him engaged in vigorous conversation, asking question after penetrating question. This was the famous Socratic method, a form of cooperative dialogue based on asking and answering questions to stimulate critical thinking and draw out underlying presumptions. What made this approach so powerful? Unlike the sophists who taught persuasive speaking for a fee, Socrates wasn't interested in winning arguments. He was interested in pursuing truth. He understood that meaningful learning doesn't come from passive reception of information, but from active intellectual engagement. There's a story that a young man once approached Socrates, eager to learn from the great philosopher. "I want to acquire knowledge," he said. Socrates led him to the seashore and suddenly pushed him into the water, holding his head under until the young man was gasping for air. When he finally released him, Socrates asked, "What did you desire most when you were underwater?" "Air," the young man replied. "Well," said Socrates, "when you desire knowledge as much as you just desired air, you will have it." Whether this tale is apocryphal or not, it captures something essential about Socrates' approach. He understood that real learning isn't about accumulating information. It's about kindling a burning desire to understand. Think about education today. We often treat knowledge as a commodity to be transferred from teacher to student, measured by standardized tests and credentialed with degrees. But Socrates recognized that true education is about transformation, not information. It's about developing the capacity to think critically, examine assumptions, and pursue understanding with passion. When he described himself as a midwife of ideas, Socrates was acknowledging that wisdom cannot be given to another person. It must be born from within through the labor of critical examination. The teacher's role is not to fill an empty vessel, but to assist in the birth of insight. How different would your life be if you approached learning this way? Not as the passive consumption of facts, but as an active, questioning engagement with ideas. Not as a means to an end, a job, a degree, a credential, but as a transformative practice that reshapes how you see yourself and the world. Socrates' second lesson: knowledge isn't something you have, it's something you do. Cultivate active questioning rather than passive acceptance. The quality of your life depends on the quality of the questions you ask. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. For all his revolutionary thinking, Socrates was deeply embedded in Athenian society. He served in its military, participated in its democracy, albeit critically, and ultimately accepted its laws, even when they condemned him to death. This wasn't blind conformity. Socrates recognized that humans are social creatures who find meaning and purpose within communities. He criticized Athenian society not to tear it down, but to help it realize its highest ideals. In Plato's Republic, Socrates engages in a thought experiment about justice, creating an imaginary ideal city to better understand what justice means in the individual soul. This reflects his understanding that personal virtue and social ethics are inseparable. Unlike later philosophers who might retreat from society to contemplate in isolation, Socrates conducted his philosophical inquiry in the bustling marketplace. He engaged with people from all walks of life, politicians and prostitutes, generals and craftsmen. He believed wisdom emerged from this engagement with diverse perspectives. The trial of Socrates reveals much about his view of citizenship. Charged with corrupting the youth and impiety after Athens had suffered military defeat and political turmoil, Socrates had opportunities to escape punishment. Friends offered to help him flee. During his trial, he could have proposed exile as an alternative to execution. Instead, he accepted the verdict while maintaining his innocence. In Plato's Crito, Socrates explains this decision through a dialogue with the laws of Athens themselves. Having benefited from the city's protection and opportunities throughout his life, he could not in good conscience disobey its laws when they became inconvenient. This wasn't blind submission to authority. It was a nuanced understanding of the social contract, the relationship between individual freedom and collective governance that would become central to political philosophy centuries later. Consider how this applies to our own lives. In an age of hyper-individualism, where personal fulfillment often trumps collective responsibility, Socrates reminds us that meaningful human life is inescapably social. Our flourishing is bound up with the communities we inhabit. At the same time, he demonstrates that responsible citizenship includes principled criticism. Blind conformity doesn't serve society any better than selfish rejection of social bonds. Socrates' third lesson: seek your place within the larger community. True fulfillment comes not from escaping social responsibility, but from finding your unique way to contribute to the common good. Challenge your society to be better while acknowledging your debt to it. Strong minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, weak minds discuss people. Even as he engaged with people from all walks of life, Socrates maintained an unwavering focus on what truly matters. He had little interest in material wealth or status, reportedly wearing the same threadbare cloak year-round and going barefoot even in winter. When visiting the market once, he reportedly remarked, "How many things there are which I do not need." While his fellow Athenians pursued wealth, power, and honor, Socrates sought something more fundamental: the improvement of his soul through virtue and wisdom. This focus extended to his conversations. While others gossiped about people or debated current events, Socrates directed attention to ideas that transcend time and place. What is justice? What is courage? What is the good life? He believed that understanding these concepts was essential to living well. This commitment to principles over particulars was revolutionary in a culture often driven by factional interests and personal loyalties. Socrates evaluated arguments based on their logical merit, not the status or eloquence of the speaker. His wife, Xanthippe, reportedly complained about his neglect of practical matters. Legend has it that she once dumped a chamber pot over his head in frustration at his seeming indifference to their material circumstances. Whether true or not, this story highlights the tension between philosophical ideals and worldly concerns. Yet Socrates wasn't an impractical dreamer. He simply recognized that material prosperity without wisdom leads to emptiness. The unexamined life is not worth living, he declared at his trial, suggesting that mere biological existence without reflection lacks the quality that makes human life meaningful. How might this perspective transform your own priorities? In a world obsessed with accumulation and achievement, Socrates invites us to ask, what truly constitutes a good life? Is it the size of your house, the prestige of your job, the number of your followers? Or is it the quality of your character, the depth of your relationships, the integrity of your choices? Socrates' fourth lesson: focus on what truly matters. Distinguish between the essential and the trivial in your finite lifetime. Material prosperity has its place, but the cultivation of wisdom and virtue should be your highest priority. By all means, marry. If you get a good wife, you'll become happy. If you get a bad one, you'll become a philosopher. Perhaps Socrates' most enduring quality was his sense of humor and irony, even in the face of death. When sentenced to execution by drinking hemlock, he reportedly quipped that perhaps, as a benefactor to Athens, he should be rewarded with free meals for life instead. This humor wasn't mere deflection or entertainment. It reflected a profound acceptance of life's contradictions and limitations, what philosophers later called irony. Socrates understood that human existence is inherently limited and flawed, yet he embraced it with good humor rather than despair. Consider his approach to death. In Plato's Apology, Socrates reasons that death must be either like a dreamless sleep, and thus nothing to fear, or a transition to another realm where he could continue philosophical conversations with great figures of the past, which would be wonderful. Either way, he concludes, there's no rational basis for fearing it. This combination of rational analysis and serene acceptance characterized his final hours. According to Plato's account in Phaedo, Socrates spent his last day discussing the immortality of the soul with friends. When the time came to drink the hemlock, he did so calmly, lying down as the poison took effect and his body gradually grew cold from the feet upward. His final words, "Crito, we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please don't forget to pay the debt." have been interpreted variously. Most scholars believe this was a thank offering to the god of healing, suggesting that Socrates viewed death as a cure for the ailment of mortal life. What's most remarkable isn't just his courage, but his consistency. Having lived questioning everything, he died the same way, examining the nature of death itself, rather than simply fearing it. How would your own relationship with mortality change if you approached it with such philosophical curiosity and equanimity? How would you live differently if you truly accepted the temporary nature of your existence without either denial or despair? Socrates' fifth lesson: embrace life's fundamental ironies and limitations with humor and grace. Confront mortality not with fear, but with philosophical curiosity. Live each day as a question worth exploring rather than a problem to be solved. The ultimate irony of Socrates' life is that this man who wrote nothing became Western philosophy's most influential figure. Everything we know about him comes through the writings of others, primarily his student Plato, whose dialogues feature Socrates as the main character. This leads to what scholars call the Socratic problem. How can we distinguish the historical Socrates from the literary character created by Plato? Where does the mentor end and the student begin? In a sense, this ambiguity perfectly embodies Socrates' legacy. He wasn't concerned with creating a philosophical system or ensuring his name would be remembered. He was concerned with inspiring others to think for themselves, to continue the endless conversation about what matters most. When he compared himself to a gadfly whose stinging questions roused Athens from complacency, Socrates understood his role. He wasn't there to provide comfortable answers, but to provoke essential questions. He was the irritant that produced the pearl of Western philosophy. 24 centuries after his execution, we're still engaging with Socrates' questions. What constitutes a good life? How should we organize our societies? What can we truly know? What does it mean to be virtuous? These questions remain as vital today as they were in ancient Athens. In an age of artificial intelligence, environmental crisis, and profound social division, the Socratic approach, questioning assumptions, examining values, seeking wisdom through dialogue, is more essential than ever. What if you approached your life with Socrates' mindset? What if you embraced not knowing as the beginning of wisdom? What if you treated learning as active questioning rather than passive reception? What if you sought to contribute to your community while holding it to higher standards? What if you focused on what truly matters rather than what society happens to value? What if you faced life's contradictions with humor and equanimity? Consider this: Socrates transformed Western thought without writing a single book, founding an institution, or holding political office. He did it through conversations, by engaging deeply with the people and questions he encountered each day. You may never be remembered as Socrates is, but you can bring the same quality of authentic inquiry to your own life and relationships. You can choose to live questioningly rather than dogmatically, to prioritize understanding over winning arguments, to seek wisdom rather than mere knowledge. Socrates once described himself as the midwife of ideas. He didn't claim to possess wisdom himself, but helped others give birth to insights through careful questioning. Perhaps his greatest lesson is that wisdom isn't something we attain once and for all. It's a lifelong practice of examination, reflection, and dialogue. Remember, the goal isn't to become Socrates, but to follow his example by becoming more fully yourself through continuous questioning. If you found value in today's exploration of Socratic wisdom, consider how you might apply these 5 lessons in your own life. Embrace intellectual humility. Begin with, "I know that I don't know," and let that fuel your curiosity. Practice active questioning rather than passive acceptance of information. Find your place in the community, balancing individual growth with social responsibility. Focus on what truly matters, the cultivation of wisdom and virtue over material accumulation. face life's limitations and contradictions with humor and philosophical curiosity. Pick just one of these principles to practice this week. Notice how it changes your experience of yourself and the world around you. Until next time, learn from the past to create an extraordinary future. The highest form of human excellence is to question oneself and others.